Okay, so I'm not trying to scare anybody when I say this, but there's a huge possibility based on what's going on right now that manga could be heading the way of American comics. And what I mean by that is, well, how many people actually even talk about American comics nowadays? Don't get me wrong, I know the community's huge. I get it. Don't attack me, please. Don't hurt me. Hey, real quickly, hit that subscribe button and that bell to get notified when I drop some stuff, anime, manga related stuff, everything you would want. Hit those buttons. Please do yourself a favor and me. But statistically, sales show that American comics are at an all-time low and continue to go downhill. While some will argue it's because of the social justice warrior stuff. I'm tired of woke shit in my comic books. Ultimately, there's a validity to say that American comics have went downhill in terms of sales, in terms of what some might say quality, and just in general, people really aren't vibing with American comics in comparison to the massive boom that it had, let's just say in the 90s, or especially to their Eastern counterparts known as manga. Because any sales graph will show you that comic books in comparison to manga sell very little. There's a lot of factors you could throw into that. The fact that anime right now is booming and having a massive surgence in the US, or resurgence, and ultimately comic books is not. But let's take a closer look at what's really going on in the scene.
No matter how you move, get it done. No matter how you move, get it done. No matter how you move, get it done. No matter how you move, get it done.
Okay people, before we continue, wanted to let you know this video is brought to you by Manscaped.com, the premium brand for men's grooming and hygiene products across the globe. When it comes to your quote-unquote man maintenance, what are you doing to manage that chaotic body hair? There's a lot of things to tackle when it comes to your body hair, including just keeping it managed on your chest, back, legs, arms, underarms, and the unruly areas. Manscaped hooked me up with their Performance Package 4.0 grooming kit, which has all the tools you need to manage your body hair. For starters, we have the Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, a waterproof and cordless electric body hair trimmer that can be used on hair in dry areas. It also has ceramic blades with skin safe technology, which really helps so that way you don't get cuts. The Lawnmower 4.0 has a powerful 7,000 RPM motor and its handy LED spotlight that you can turn on. You can bring the trimmer wherever you go thanks to the wireless charging dock and the secure travel lock feature. To engage the travel lock, tap the button on the front 3 times to turn it on and tap the button 3 times to turn it off. Also included the Crop Preserver ball deodorant and the Crop Reviver ball toner spray. Simply apply the Crop Preserver after your shower. The Crop Reviver has soothing aloe vera and witch hazel to quickly refresh the area wherever you need it. Manscaped has you covered from head to toe with their Weed Whacker nose and ear hair trimmer. It's waterproof and has the same skin safe technology as a Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer. And that's not all. For a limited time, you get 2 free gifts: the Shed travel bag and the Manscaped anti-chafing boxer briefs. These boxers are pretty comfortable and have microfiber material that's flexible, and the Shed travel bag is a luxury leather traveling case that is perfectly sized to keep under the sink or take with you on the go when you gotta groom, when you're not at home. What are you waiting for? Head on over to manscaped.com and get your 20% off plus free shipping and those 2 free gifts when you use my promo code here at manscaped.com. One of the biggest things you could throw the argument is, in terms of Hollywood right now, the big thing that drives the industry at this particular point are superhero films, in particular Marvel and DC. When you drop a Marvel film, whether it be Thor, whether people hate it, love it, it's going to make money, it's going to do gangbusters in the box office, and people are gonna go crazy. Right now, and for the longest time, it's been this whole multiverse thing, and just in general, the Avengers, all of that stuff is huge. However, sales don't translate down to the comic books. The comic books, despite the fact that their movie counterparts are doing gangbusters in the box office, aren't really all that sought after. In fact, in terms of mainstream wise, comic books are everything but existent in the market. Like, there is, of course, the cult following that comics have. The readers are going to continue to support it, and by all means, I'm looking to get into comics more. Invincible really relit that whole love that I have for it. So by no means am I trying to disparage the comic industry. I honestly have a lot of respect and admiration for it. Honestly, sometimes I look at it like, why aren't the comic books benefiting from these giant Hollywood films that are being put out there, and why is it that comic books, if anything, are shrinking in popularity opposed to growing alongside their movie counterparts? And whatever that is, that reasoning behind it is definitely showcasing that there is some negative impact that is being had. And while on the flip side of things, you see that anime is growing at an astronomical rate. We have a lot of people in the West that are buying into it. Global corporations, Sony just bought out Funimation, Crunchyroll. Like, it is going into a whole giant boom that it's never seen before. Like, a lot of people used to cite, the late 90s, early 2000s. That's when anime had it. That's when anime was at its peak. And I would say that at this particular point, 90s 90s and early 2000s anime's popularity, not quality, popularity, before people lynch me.
I know what you're thinking. Which one's better?
Pales in comparison to where it's at right now. It is just a mainstream thing. You will find an 80-year-old and an 8-year-old that will know simultaneously about Attack on Titan or Naruto. But that also leads to question to, well, what happens if the similar fate of the comic book industry starts to wane on manga? Because just keeping it real, one of the things that I'm noticing on the flip side of things in the Japanese realm, and just in general, it'll start trickling down over here, is that they are starting to focus more on the anime side of things. For the longest time, these publishers is like, yo, dog, we gotta sell our books. Like the anime adaptation, that's so cool, that's basically one big commercial, but the manga is where we're gonna make all our money. The manga is where we make all our money, and I think that that tune has changed dramatically. I mean, alone, if you just follow the history of what's been happening in the last couple of years with anime and manga, series like Demon Slayer ended poof in the height of its popularity, and it only grew larger because of the anime adaptation and people buying into it. The money that was made off of the films and all that has been astronomical, and while the manga has seen a surge in sales as well, that's to say that, simply put, people haven't burned out yet. And we're just seeing that as a massive trend moving forward. Dr. Stone, boom, it ended, and the anime seasons are going to continue onward. Martial Magic and Muscles, a manga that is blowing up right now, is apparently on its final arc before the anime adaptation even happens, and that is the polar opposite. And you're probably like, okay, you're bombarding me with all this information. What the hell does that mean? What are you talking about? I'm saying that it's starting to look the same way that for the last decade plus, over a decade plus at this particular point, that comic books have started to shift gears and focus more so on the comic book live action adaptation movies.
All that for a drop of blood.
Anime is starting to focus more on the anime than the manga. The negative effect that seemingly has transpired with the comic book industry and how those things are starting to shrink could very well happen as well when the goal is no longer to sell you these books and is more so to get you to buy everything else. Like, while the books is still always going to be a priority, hello, as a part of their inventory, as a part of what they're selling, it looks like more so because they understand in the West that it's still not a really popular thing for people to read. They might look at it as, do we really need to sell books everywhere, considering we're probably making more money off of anime and movies and stuff like that? Do we really need to rely on the books anymore? Because every sign right now is showing that Shueisha, Shogakukan, all of these publishing companies aren't really necessarily on the side of pushing the manga. In fact, they're ending these mangas short, opposed to back in the day where manga would go on forever and ever. Naruto, 700 chapters. One Piece is the last of a dying breed, 1,000+ chapters, but it seems on average they're starting to cut them short around 200 or so chapters. And while some might say that's a benefit to it, nevertheless, that is a massive difference in what made anime and manga, especially some of these ones, special, where people could feel like, yo, each and every week for the next however many years, I'm gonna have a chapter, baby, let's go. You grow accustomed to it. That's one of the reasons why the big three even happened, Naruto, One Piece, and Bleach. They were running for so many years that they had a long time to be able to accumulate these fan bases that continue to push to where they would sell. You know, Naruto would do 900,000, a million first week. Likewise with Bleach, One Piece doing millions and millions and millions, because the manga had the time and also the push and support to be able to do that. Well, what happens when, again, that support ain't there? What happens when all sights is less on those books and more so on everything else, similar to the comic book industry? And then that's not even to mention the fact that, considering the more westernized manga becomes, the more integrated into this culture, probably a lot of the same pitfalls that you've had in comic books are going to start hitting manga. Like, honestly, there's something that a lot of manga fans don't know, and if they do, they usually try to be mum about it, but I'm gonna spill the beans right now, because a lot of people like to shit on comic books and say, oh no, there's too much woke shit, there's too much social justice warrior stuff, I can't enjoy it anymore. Let me let you in on a little secret with manga. While it may be encoded very heavily so a lot of people don't catch it, there's a lot of woke shit already in manga. I mean, dog, have you ever seen One Piece? Like, literally, there's arcs upon arcs of stuff that is touching up on quote-unquote woke stuff. Fishman Island, for example, is a massive metaphor for racism against black people. Like, yes, I know that that's something hard to swallow, but essentially the fishmen are representations of black people, and ultimately it's all about, you know, the slavery and being kept in confinement and whatnot. That's a big deal. Not to mention everything that's going on in the manga right now with Nika, the sun god, and everything. Like, there's a lot of stuff that you probably immediately like, oh my god, but yeah, it's encoded in there. And by no means am I only singling out One Piece. It's in there, it's just more encoded. Now what happens when the publishers over here, the Westerners, the people that, you know, they start investing even more so into it, and they're like, can you lighten up on the encoding a little bit? You know, what happens when Greg West gets to tell Eiichiro Oda, well, maybe not Oda, it'll probably never happen with Oda, but the next guy to come through, well, can you make your message a little bit more clear on you support these rights, or you want this voice to be heard? Can you just make it more understandable for, let's just say, anybody from the age of 5 to 85? Well, there you go. That's where you start heading towards the road of what's happening with Marvel and DC, and what a lot of people's complaints are of why sales are not that great in comparison to their manga counterparts, and why it feels like the American comic book industry is falling apart. I have to stress again, by no means am I trying to disrespect American comic books. I understand that y'all love this. I understand there's a strong community, and I'm not trying to come in here and be a piece of crap. I started off as a comic book fan before manga and anime. And it's crazy because I say all of that and there's still going to be massive amounts of people with pitchforks. Oh, you don't know shit about the comic book industry. Okay, alright, you win. It's the greatest era. We're in the golden era of comic books. Fine. And I just say all that as hyperbole. You know the truth. Like, honestly, it's only a matter of time as investors get in. Like, usually when people invest their money, they want their voices to be heard. And so while Sony got Funimation and Crunchyroll, and then we got the battle of Netflix over here, like, I already know how Netflix do. Netflix definitely likes to voice their opinions on several things via their medium or whatnot. It's only a matter of time before it starts to get heavier and heavier. And while anime might continue to get even more popular, anime might, you know, reach heights we've never seen yet, ultimately, what's that going to do to the manga, where you're getting all of these voices that are going to be, you know, having their input now because their money is involved? You're going to have things where it's going to be less encoded with messages and more so direct and forward of, yes, we need a 5-year-old to understand this. That's where you're going to head down that slippery slope, and that's where ultimately American comic books and manga might have the same fate, and that is such a shame. That's where at that particular point we're going to see things like webtoons, things like French manga, anything outside of the realms of what is right now being targeted is going to start to creep in and blow up, and that's where a lot of people are going to run to. That's where a lot of people are going to say, oh, well, that industry hasn't been contaminated yet with all of these messages constantly down our throats. We're going to run over there. And considering the fact that Solo Leveling is getting an anime right now, that's definitely going to boost the popularity and also the idea, yo dog, manhwa, unless they already get to that industry too. Ultimately, that's going to be where people are going to run. They're going to run to independent creators, which by all means, baby, come over here, dog. Nimrod Media is on the way. Because independent creators that have not been, you know, tapped in with big money and whatnot, ultimately are going to write the stories they want to write and not going to care about putting anything in. Don't get me wrong, I love positive messages. I love when people are expressing their thoughts and their, you know, how they feel via their art. However, some people don't like that, and we've seen that the sales of comic books, and we've seen that the state of comic books in comparison to the manga, in comparison to some of its heights, are nowhere close to that. And I would love to see someday for comics to be back when I was a little kid and my cousin was telling me about, yo, I got this comic, and he used to bombard me with all these, and I don't know anything about comic books, but this is so freaking cool. I would love for that era to return. Will it? Time will tell, especially considering the fact that I've started to notice that it's a little bit of a crack in the armor of these Marvel movies. Little by little are getting more criticized, not being favored and whatnot. And then ultimately, well, things start to fall apart. Eventually, comic books will come full circle. Everything comes back around. So while comic books right now may be at a low and anime and manga is at a rise, what happens when anime starts reaching that point? What happens when eventually what will inevitably happen? People having their opinions voiced because their money is invested, and these opinions are all in your face. That's when it's going to be problematic. I'm not saying the messaging is problematic. I'm saying that that's where people are going to lose interest. That's where things are going to start falling apart. It's not going to feel natural anymore. I mean, for crying out loud, if you just compare storytelling in anime and manga from the 80s to where we're at right now, alone, the graphic nature of it has definitely subsided. Like, if you look at an anime OVA from like 89, you'll see a dude's guts being blown out of his body. And while occasionally you see that, for the most part, they try to steer clear from that in this day and age. Like, you're not going to get a Fist of the North Star type series in Shonen Jump anymore. Like, and if you do, it'll be panned and looked at as like, you let Chainsaw Man in here? You know, I can't go a video without mentioning the good old Chainsaw Man. Chainsaw Man, save me! Or save the comics and manga industry, because if history tells any tale, it tells that eventually it will be inevitable that manga will head the direction of where comic books is at right now. And I mean, it'll eventually go full circle, but how long will we have to trudge through the desert asking for water? Extremely, enormously curious what you guys think about this topic. I guess the biggest question is, do you think that, considering everything that I laid out for you you guys, there's a high probability that manga will inevitably head down the same path as American comic books. Do you think we're going to see a massive L in the future, or it's going to go a different way? Your thoughts on that? How do you feel about the state of American comics or manga as it stands right now? Again, I would say that manga right now, there's nothing to worry about at the moment. Sales are great. In fact, it is increasing in the West, but once that influence comes in, do you still feel it's going to continue to rise? I think we're going to get to a point where probably at the very least, in maybe even both places, I don't want to say just the West, but possibly in both places, but especially in the West, where manga probably won't be a big talked about thing. It's already kind of, a minuscule thing as it is in the grand scheme of things, but I could definitely see it eventually plateauing, and then anime being the really only voice for that medium. And yeah, X, Y, and Z. I laid it out for you. And your overall thoughts and expectations for both industries. Honestly, I want to see both flourish. Y'all know I'm a massive fan of the arts in general, let alone manga, comics, anime, the cartoons. Dog, I was a massive fan of Batman the Animated Series. I was a massive fan of Spider-Man, the original X-Men, Superman the Animated Series, Justice League. Like, I loved all of those cartoons, and the direct videos ones are kind of cool too. But comic books, not doing great, and I would hate for manga to share that same fate. Not to say that, it's better than comics, although, I prefer manga at this point in my life now. I don't know. I'm blabbering on. Just let me know your thoughts on this one. That's all I have for this one. I'm ForneverWorld, and as always, people, have an awesome day. And remember the golden rule. Anime and manga for life, boy. Have an awesome day. Peace and manga, comics. This is Mad Lad. Mad, I tell ya.
So just go to find me.